and check the stream because that shit that happened last night. Okay, it's actually going. There we go. Okay, tell me what happened.
Um, um, they they had their confession scene. There were fake function and mooching that Shalian sliced. Oh no, Wachung sliced them in half, and then Shalian killed the function one, and it turned into um the fucking face guy. Um, and then they went back to the real function in mooching, and Shalian told him what happened, and they were like, "Oh shit!" And they left the mountain while Huacheng and Shalian were um trying to figure out how to beat this guy.
No, they were luring him away so that Function and Moojin couldn't
Oh,
get him.
right.
And then he
Yes,
disappeared.
right. He disappeared.
He disappeared. Little boy. Little white men scurry to me like rats.
Hey, hey, whoa.
Why is he kissing you on the lips? He's a freak. Ew, he didn't like your stinky breath. And then what happened at the very end?
I don't remember.
They're going through the statues, and Shilian is like asking to look at them, and then there's one that has like a veil over its body that he's like, I want to see it. And then Hua Chung's like, no, you can't see it. If you want to see anything, I'll paint it for you right now.
Right,
And
right.
then, so then they find out that White No Face disappeared, and then they're walking through the divine statues, and they see one that has a sword out, and the tip of the sword is red. And so they unveil it, and then on the sword was Long Ying, the little boy.
Right.
So that ends with, it was a divine statue of Shilian beneath the white veil, a god-pleasing crown prince statue. There was a sword in one hand, a flower in the other, and a smile on its face. But there were traces of blood on that smile. The blood had come from the sword in its hand. A boy dangled there, pierced through. The boy had bandages covering his head, and blood covering his body. It was Long Ying. Alright, chapter 94. I'm not going to read the title because it's a spoiler. Actually, no. Yeah, I won't. Long Ying's head had dropped to the side, as though he'd lost consciousness. When Shilian saw it was him, he moved to save him without thinking, but he stopped dead in his tracks as his mind caught up with the situation. There was no one besides White No Face here, so why would Long Ying suddenly appear? Seeing that the pure, holy statue of the god-pleasing crown prince had been corrupted by dripping blood, Hua Cheng was obviously furious. His dark expression radiated rage, and the scimitar Ming exuded a chilling aura. "Get the hell down," he said. With that, Long Ying's drooping head actually heated and righted itself. He blinked open his eyes, then slowly pulled himself off the sword and dropped to the ground. When White No Face blew up the wave of silver butterflies that had surrounded him, he had used the distraction that the blinding silver light provided to hide himself under this divine statue's white veil. Then he'd transformed. If he could disguise himself as Lang Ying, it meant he must have seen the boy somewhere before. "Where's the real Lang Ying?" Shilian demanded. "Your Highness, maybe there never was a real Lang Ying," Hua Cheng said. If Long Ying had never existed to begin with, and was only White No Face in his weakened form, everything would be easy to explain. But when Shilian remembered the girl, Zhao Ying, who had died on Mount Yuzhun, he wished that explanation made less sense than it did. Shilian swiftly thought up another possibility. Or perhaps he devoured Long Ying. The Long Ying before them was growing taller. His body stretched upwards, and the bandages on his face unwrapped and dropped away to reveal the mask beneath. He lifted his head slightly when he heard Shilian's guess, and seemed to smile. You guessed right. So it was true. After White No Face was pulverized and dispersed by Jun Wu, all that was left of him was a wisp of a broken soul, wandering the mortal realm. He drifted for who knows how long, and at some point in all that time he met the ghost Long Ying. He must have somehow coaxed or deceived Long Ying into hosting him within his own body, since his remnant soul might have been too weak to devour him outright. He had stayed glued to Long Ying's body and gradually recovered, and the end result was standing before Shilian and Hua Cheng. Ghost devouring ghost, White No Face had bitten the hand that fed him, his host, Long Ying. Just as He Xuan had devoured the Reverend of Empty Words, Long Ying had become White No Face's slave. It only took a few moments for Long Ying to completely transform into White No Face. Hua Cheng eyed him. Why would Long Ying agree to lend you his spirit body? A request like that would seem to be like a stranger asking a homeowner to open their doors and allow them to live there and eat their food. Long Ying had survived as a ghost for hundreds of years. Although he was timid and hesitant, he shouldn't have been so foolish. I can of course provide an answer for your question, White No Face replied amiably. But are you sure the one beside you wants to hear it? Hua Cheng looked at Shilian, whose expression was slightly strange. He surprisingly didn't notice the gaze sent his way. Surname Long, Young An, and he suffers from human face disease, White No Face said. Why did he agree to let me eat him? Can't you guess? Shilian's face instantly went pale. Veins popped on the back of his hands, and he swung his sword with a shout of, Shut up! White No Face sidestepped and avoided the strike, but Shilian's attack sliced through the sword in the hands of his own divine statue. Now he'd done it. He'd left the god-pleasing crown prince statue wielding a broken sword, making the statue itself a ruined artifact. Shilian snapped out of his frenzy like he'd been drenched by a bucket of cold water. The wraith butterflies seemed outraged and swarmed over. White No Face appeared completely unbothered and gave a toneless laugh as he covered his face with his sleeve. In an instant, he vanished into the darkness, leaving their conflict entirely. Shilian stared at the broken stone sword on the ground. I'm sorry, he murmured to Hua Cheng automatically. Hua Cheng cut him off. Isn't it silly for your highness to apologize to me? He's gone. Now what? Shilian pulled himself together somewhat. Did he flee? We can't let him enter the kiln. The pair hurried out of the cave of 10,000 gods and back onto the snowy mountain. Right as they made it outside, they felt the earth quake and the mountain shake. Looking up, they saw even more waves of snow crashing down. This roaring avalanche was even larger than the one they had experienced before. It was as if something massive buried under the heavy snow was just waking up, and it was roaring and shaking off thousands of years of built-up snow. Can we still make it up there? Shilian cried. Hua Cheng gripped his hand firmly. We can if you follow me. They faced off against the crashing current of ice and snow. Their passage was grueling and perilous, and for every step forward they were forced 3 steps back. But they managed to avoid the most violent waves of snow and rubble and the countless pits as they blazed their trail up the mountain. Finally, they reached the highest point. The volcano's peak was coated in an unfathomably thick layer of ice. Shilian thought he'd slip if he tried going even a bit faster, but Hua Cheng led him by the hand and moved forward with steady, fearless steps. The pair came before the volcano's enormous mouth, a cavernous maw that seemed to snarl at the heavens. When Shilian peered into its depths, he saw nothing but complete darkness. Maybe it was his imagination, but he thought he saw a red light pulsing horribly in the deepest recesses. Sometimes it was there, sometimes not. Shilian could feel himself starting to panic. He held his bamboo hat to his head to keep it from being torn away by the snowy winds. Did he go in already? Hua Cheng glanced inside, and his expression turned grim. Yes, How do you know? The kiln is closing. That caught Chilean off guard. What's going on? Why is it closing so soon? Don't there need to be at least a few ghosts inside before the slaughter can begin? That's usually true, Wachang said. However, if the kiln believes an entrant has an extremely high chance of breaking through, it will close upon their request. After a pause, he added, That's what I did back then. So is he a supreme or not? Chilean asked. What will happen if a supreme ghost king enters the kiln again? The same thing that happens to an ascended heavenly official facing another heavenly tribulation. In other words, his strength would increase exponentially. If they allowed White No-Face to pass this obstacle, the consequences were unimaginable, and once he emerged from the mountain, Chilean would surely be the first one he'd seek out. After eyeing that infinite bottomless abyss for a while, Chilean said slowly, Sanlang, I might need to go down there and resolve this. Then go. I'll come with you, Huacheng said. Huacheng replied quietly. Chilean gazed at him. Huacheng looked up and met his eyes. He cocked an eyebrow and smirked. All we're doing is heading inside to eliminate an eyesore, then breaking through the kiln again. That's it. Not like it's hard. Seeing him so relaxed, Chilean's tensed emotions loosened a little as well, and he smiled. A moment later, Huacheng said, However, there is one thing. Chilean made a curious noise and tilted his head. One of Huacheng's arms suddenly snaked around Chilean's waist and pulled him into his arms, and he lifted Chilean's chin gently with his hand. And then Huacheng enveloped Chilean's lips with his own. And then there's a picture. Hold on.
Let's go. Let's go.
That's the first time Huacheng kissed him.
Yeah.
Besides giving him air. Hold on, let me drink. They kissed and embraced for a long time in the snowstorm before their lips slowly parted. Chilean was dazed for a good moment before he jolted out of his stupor. Flushed, he opened his eyes. What was that all of a sudden? Although it wasn't the first time they'd done this, they had always used grand, dignified reasons to justify their actions. Things like lending spiritual powers, transferring air, or it was simply an accident. But now that certain things had been made clear, those excuses were exposed as falsehoods, and their actions were abruptly far more significant. Chilean didn't know where to put his hands. Should he cling to Huacheng's arms, or push him away? Should he press Huacheng's head down, or block his face? Huacheng puffed a breath into his ear. I'll lend your highness a bit of spiritual power in case of an emergency, he whispered. Won't you accept it?
Right.
Chilean unconsciously gulped. This is a bit? He stuttered. It seems like too much. I haven't paid you back for all the times before. It's not that much, and there's no rush, Huacheng said. Take your time paying it back. The account will clear one day. Chilean made a few vague noises of agreement and was just about to run away when Huacheng pulled him to stop. Your Highness, where are you going? You're running in the wrong direction, he pointed out. Only then did Chilean realize that he was running back the way they'd come. He quickly turned around, slipping on the ice in the process. He pulled his bamboo hat down. I'm just a little cold. Thought I'd jog around a bit to warm up. He put on the bamboo hat, then pushed it off to carry it on his back, then put it on again. Finally, he grabbed Huacheng's hand and held it tight. The pair stood side by side and looked into the immense abyss below. Huacheng's voice was casual. After this is resolved, I'll show Guga my proudest achievement in sculpture. Okay, Chilean replied, and they jumped down together. Let me drink. Gusts of wild wind whipped past his ears so fiercely that it felt like waves crashing into him. But even that force couldn't separate their hands. They held on to each other even harder. Yet somehow, halfway down, Chilean's hand was empty. His grip hadn't slipped, and Huacheng hadn't let go. The hand he'd been holding in his own had simply disappeared in an instant, leaving behind nothing but emptiness. Chilean's heart lurched, and he shouted, Sanlang! He was falling so quickly that his cry was left dozens of meters above his head. It sounded unreal. It was a long time before Shilian finally landed steadily on his feet. He immediately stood upright and called out again, "Sanlong!" There was no answer. The hollow echo of the name told him of the immense size of the empty space where he was now standing. There was a darkness all around, except for above. Shilian looked up. He could see a snowy white sky above his head, but it was gradually shrinking. That had to be the kiln's mouth closing. But where was Hua Cheng? Crackle. Whoosh. Shilian lit a palm torch, hoping to illuminate his surroundings and see what things were like down here. But the darkness was immeasurably deep, and his little flame couldn't show him anything. The firelight itself seemed to be absorbed by the indifferent dark void. Shilian hadn't controlled his powers well in his haste, and the flames erupted a little too high, nearly burning his face. He quickly tossed the fire to the ground. As it fell, the firelight just happened to illuminate the back of a faint white silhouette looming not far away. Shilian was instantly on guard. "Who's there?" The white silhouette turned around and answered evenly. "You know who I am." Although he answered, the muscles on the man's face did not move an inch. That was only natural, as he was wearing a half-crying, half-smiling mask. "Sanlong!" Shilian blurted. Even though the sight of that face sent terror shivering through him, Shilian hadn't cried out due to fear, but due to worry. Of course, there was still no answer, and the crying, smiling mask came another step closer. "You're wasting your time yelling. The kiln is sealed. It's only you and me here, no one else." Shilian automatically looked up again. Earlier there had still been a small snowy white sliver of sky, but that bit of light had been completely swallowed by the darkness around them. The kiln had truly sealed itself. Shilian had never expected things to turn out like this, trapped alone with White No-Face, just the two of them, locked inside the kiln. Just the two of them? Why was it just the two of them? Shilian gripped Fengshin and pointed the sword at him. "What is going on here? Are you meddling again? Where is he? Where is he right now?" White No-Face clamped the edge of the sword between two fingers and flicked the blade with his other hand, making it ring clear and crisp. "He's gone." Shilian watched this, and his eyes went cold. "Explain yourself clearly. What do you mean, gone?" "He doesn't want to follow you anymore. He's left. He's dead. What do you think?" White No-Face said leisurely. Shilian's heart dropped at first, but that was followed immediately by a violent rage, and he struck. "Stop your nonsense!" White No-Face once again caught the blade effortlessly. "Fine, fine. I was indeed talking nonsense. Don't worry. I simply sent him outside the kiln. Even if he wants to rush back in here, it's too late now." Shilian was fine with Hua Cheng trapped outside, as long as it meant he was okay. He quietly sighed a breath of relief. "But it's probably for the best that he doesn't come in," White No-Face continued. "Even if he wouldn't agree right now, who knows if he'll still want to be with you when he sees what you'll become." Shilian couldn't formulate a response. His patience finally gone. He swung his sword again, yelling, "Shut up!" White No-Face easily dodged every single one of his strikes, and Shilian cried out in rage. "I've had enough of you! What do you want? What exactly do you want? How long are you going to keep clinging to me? Why aren't you dead? Why did you come to the kiln?" "Because of you," White No-Face replied. Shilian's movement faltered, and he huffed. "What do you mean?" "You came here. So I did too," White No-Face answered languidly. Shilian's expression twisted upon hearing that. No matter how furious he was, how strong his murderous intent, it was as if White No-Face could always predict his next strike, and avoided each attack by mere millimeters. The more Shilian struck, the more he understood one cruel fact. He couldn't win. "That's right," White No-Face said, like he was reading his mind. "You can't win." As soon as he spoke those words, a blade pierced Shilian's wrist. Excruciating pain spread throughout his body, and Shilian's grip on his sword faltered. In the next second, White No-Face grabbed him by the hair and yanked him backwards, bashing him into the ground. Shilian's ears were ringing, his nose and mouth were filled with the metallic taste of blood, and his head swam. A little while later, Shilian felt a hand pull his head up from the shattered ground. A voice came from above. So sad, so pitiful. Shilian choked out a mouthful of blood. Every time I meet your highness, you always look like this, White No Face said. Makes one ache, makes one excited. Shilian swallowed another mouthful of blood, refusing to cough it out. Don't be too smug, he croaked. I might not be able to win against you, but someone can. Even if you emerge from the kiln, Junwu will just kill you again. Besides, there was still Hua Cheng. Yet White No Face replied, Who says I'm the one who will emerge from the kiln? Shilian was shocked. Not him? Who else could it be? White No Face lifted Shilian's face to look him in the eyes. Your Highness, I think you might have misunderstood, he said amiably. A Supreme certainly will emerge from the kiln, but it won't be me. It will be you. What did you say? Shilian stammered, shaken to the core. I'm not... He understood before he even finished his sentence. His body broke out in a cold sweat. That's right. That's exactly it, White No Face said. Congratulations. You finally understand my real objective. Isn't this the third path you love so much? Right now, the only beings inside the kiln were one supreme ghost and one god. On the surface, there were only two paths to take. Either White No Face would kill him and break through the kiln, or they could forget about leaving and remain trapped inside forever. But there was a third path. If Shilian killed himself, became a ghost, and defeated White No Face, then he would become a supreme and break through the kiln. Shilian struggled to snap out of his shock. What the hell do you want? Don't even think about it. Why must you go this far? Why would you force me to become a supreme? I'm not as crazy as you. Even if you want me to kill you, we both know that I can't. And if you feign defeat, the kiln might not recognize me. But White No Face replied, Is that right? You can't beat me? Don't be so sure. As he spoke, he extended a hand. Thanks to the nearby firelight, Shilian could see that he was holding a mask, an exact duplicate of the one White No Face wore. Do you remember this crying, smiling mask? White No Face asked. It suits you well. Shilian's eyes bulged. Terror crawled into his mind like a densely packed tide of insects. Take it away! Take it away! Take it away! He forced out weakly. White No Face started to laugh. It seems your Highness's memory isn't very good. So why don't you let me help you remember? He had no chance to protest. The tragically pale, crying, smiling mask melded with the infinite darkness as it was pressed heavily onto Shilian's face. And that's the end of the chapter. That's the end of Arc 3. Next chapter's flashback.
I'm scared.
Yeah. What do you think happened? What do you think their history is? What do you think?
I don't know!
Okay. I know. They were holding hands and then they weren't.
Dude, they made out though.
They did kissy kiss.
They did kissy kiss. Thank you.
And Shilian was like, "Oh, there's no reason we should be. This is all. It was all a lie to touch each other's lips before. I understand now."
No shit.
Yeah.
By the